My daughter came up to me a couple months ago, and she says, Daddy, your fit is dope, and it has been a minute. And I looked at her feeling like I needed a dictionary. Because fit, when I was growing up, was like your fitness, like are you a fit person? And now it's outfit. Dope was something that you would smoke and it wasn't good. Now it's like really cool. It's a term for being cool. And it's been a minute. A minute used to be 60 seconds. Right. Now it's a long period of time. Right. How many of you know words have changed over time? Anybody grow up in a generation different than this one and you feel like you need a dictionary for this generation? Today I want to talk about one of my favorite words. The word is evangelism. Yeah. If I could get some help on those notes, that'd be really helpful. Every one of us, when we see that word, you feel something. Some of you, when you see that word, you think of the great Billy Graham, the great evangelist, led many people to the Lord. Some of you, when you see that word, you feel something very different. You think about the concert or the ball game and the guy on the bullhorn. How many know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And you're like, don't think that's it. Like they're yelling, y'all going to hell. Like, did you know hell has 2 syllables? I didn't. But every guy on the bullhorn is like 2 syllables. How about this one? Have you ever met someone that's so heavenly minded that they are no earthly good? Like they can't have a normal conversation. They're like, brother. I'm like, how you doing? Brother, I'm blessed. I've been washed by the blood of the Lamb. I have been sanctified and glorified and chicken fried, and Jesus comes back and you're going to fry like bacon. You ever meet that guy? Some of you have like a face going through your mind right now. Or how about this one? Have you ever heard of missionary dating? Missionary dating, where someone who loves Jesus decides they want to date someone who doesn't lead Jesus, and they hope that they come to Jesus. First off, it doesn't work, and if that's your plan, stop. It doesn't work. But I get it, especially ladies. Ladies, I understand. Single ladies, it's real. Because oftentimes you have 2 choices. You have the cute guy, and you have the godly guy. And you, in your mind, are thinking, which one's easier? Is it easier to make the godly guy cute, or the cute guy godly? And it doesn't work. Today I want to talk to you about evangelism. We're going to start in Mark chapter 2, but we're going to spend the majority of time in John chapter 1. Mark chapter 2 says, but when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with such scum? Can you imagine? The religious leaders, this is the equivalent of pastors. Jesus is eating with people who aren't allowed to go to church. Why does he eat with such scum? And Jesus heard this, and he told them, healthy people do not need a doctor. Sick people do. I have not come to call. I have come to call not those who think that they're righteous, but those who know they're sinners. Religious people hated Jesus. It was the religious people that killed Jesus. And people who did not carry Jesus' values. People who didn't believe what Jesus believed. People who lived reckless lives. Loved being around Jesus. Evangelism is telling sick people who can make them well. We think it's normal to tell people about what we enjoy, as long as it's not church. Here's a great example. Favorite restaurant in Boca, we're on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Wow. You don't have favorite restaurants here? You are in a vacation destination. All right, let's try this one more time. Favorite restaurant on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. That sounds awesome, except for McDonald's. Whoever said McDonald's, that's the lie. Or someone needs to give this guy $20 so he can have a real meal after church today. But you tell someone about your favorite restaurant, everyone's cool. Like one of my favorites is there's a place called Seasons 52. Oh, yeah. And they have a salmon on a cedar plank. Oh. Like they have like this honey drizzle and seasoning on the top of it. I'm talking about like the salmon melts in your mouth. With some mashed potatoes and the asparagus. Some of y'all need to go to Season 52 after church today. If I were to tell you about my favorite soccer team, Inter Miami. Any fans? 4 of you. No one else? Really? No one? I got to watch Lionel Messi play with my 17-year-old son. It was awesome. Got to watch the greatest player ever score a goal. It was so much fun. But the moment I share church, everyone gets kind of weird. Until you understand what church is. We got a guy in our church who started coming because he knew someone else at the church. He had an encounter with God and his life began to change. Now his life's still a mess. He was coming to church on Sundays, beginning to follow Jesus, but on Friday nights and Saturdays he'd get the text from his friends, hey, you want to go to the club? And sometimes he'd come a little bit hungover on Sunday morning. Didn't have his act together. He was working on it. And his sister was going through a divorce. And he invites his sister to come to our church. She doesn't like church. She doesn't believe in God, but she's seeing the change that's happening in her brother. And she's hurting. And she knows the answer to her problem doesn't live inside of her. So she shows up. She just walks in the room and tears start flooding down her face. She tells my wife after the service, I don't know what that was, but I literally started crying the moment I walked in. She didn't know about the presence of God. She just experienced it. She started bringing her son. Her son acting out like any kid whose parents are going through a divorce. He starts showing up, and he really likes some people that serve in our kids' ministry. And he starts asking in the morning, hey, can we go to church? Because he likes a couple of the people there. And then one Sunday, he talks to one of those leaders serving in that kid's room. And he said, would you teach me how to know God? The guy who started the story that led to his nephew coming to the Lord. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't have his life put together. He just knew his sister needed Jesus. And he knew how to help her be made well. According to the scriptures, found people find people. According to the scripture, it is impossible for someone to claim to follow Jesus and not be concerned about those who are far from him. It is not an option to follow Jesus and to not care about the number one thing Jesus cares about. How many of you are parents in the room? Is any parents in the room? Okay, got some parents in the room? Like when you go on vacation and you're getting in the van on the way to wherever it is you're going, and you look back and you have 4 kids, but only 3 are in the van, are you like, I've got 3 out of 4, that's pretty good? Mamas, what do? You panic because one of your kids is not there. And you start frantically looking. You're not concerned about the other 3. They're where they're supposed to be. The one you care about is the one that's missing. How much more the heart of God? So today I want to share with you one of my favorite stories in the Bible from John chapter 1. It says in verse 43, the next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip. Say, finding Philip. Who found who? Did Jesus find Philip or did Philip find Jesus? Good job. Not a trick question. Jesus found Philip. And Jesus said, follow me. Now, we live in a culture where people will use this phrase, I'm just trying to find myself. Ever hear that phrase? You know, I've never heard the other end of that phrase. Like, I've never had someone say, you know, I was trying to find myself, and the other day I was at Walmart, and I was getting groceries and an oil change and all of this, and I was looking down the row, and I saw myself. And I went down to myself, and we hugged and embraced, and I found myself. Never happened. You can't find yourself. But notice, Philip was far from God. And Jesus went to Philip, and he said, follow me. Philip was not looking for Jesus. The lost people in your life are not looking for Jesus. Now notice the first thing Philip does. In verse 44, it says, Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael. Say, Philip found Nathanael. All right, we're going to complete those two sentences. Jesus found Philip. Philip found Nathanael. Jesus found Philip. Philip found Nathanael. The first thing Philip does is go and share with someone he loves about the person he just met. And he says, we have found the one that Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael was far from Jesus, but close to Philip. So I want to ask you a question today. It's a question that I want to work in throughout this entire rest of the message. Who do you know that's far from God, but close to you? Who in your family is far from God, but close to you? Who among your friends, the people inside of your school, the people in your workplace? You see, every person has an eternal destination. Every person. There is option one, that they will spend eternity with God in this place called heaven. Option two, they live eternally separated from God, and God isn't coming to rescue. The answer to where people spend eternity comes down to who in your life is far from God and close to you. That what they need is Jesus. Which leads to the question then, if I'm supposed to reach people far from God, how do you reach people for Jesus? Have you ever wondered that question? Have you ever felt unqualified to share your faith with somebody? Like, what if they ask questions I don't know the answers to? What if they reject it? Often in church, I felt frustrated when someone tells me I should do something, but they don't tell me how to do it. Have you ever been to the message where it's like super inspirational and passionate? You're like, that was amazing. I'd love to do that. And you're like, how do you do that? Like, I have no idea. Today I want to teach you, how do you reach people far from God? How do you see the people in your life that are close to you but far from God and share your faith and invite them to church? Verse 46 says, Nazareth. This is Nathanael responding to Philip. Can anything good come from Nazareth? I love his answer. Come and see. He goes to tell his friend about Jesus. His friend is a skeptic. Notice, he does not argue with him. He doesn't try to clean him up. He doesn't try to correct his wrong thinking, his wrong perspective. He doesn't get in an argument on Facebook. You know what's never happened on Facebook? Someone puts some outlandish phrase and you go into that Facebook and you add your little comment there. You know what's never happened? Wow, thanks so much for your comment. I really see your perspective. I think I'm going to change my perspective now. Happened? Never. We need to stop making posts on Facebook and start having a come and see attitude. Come and see. I had a guy at my gym, one of the trainers. People are funny when they find out, like, you're a pastor. Like, so I never know how to answer the question. Like, so what do you do for a living? And as soon as they're like, I'm a pastor, they're like, oh, praise Jesus. Hallelujah. Bless you. Like, stop. My gosh. I just talked to you 5 minutes ago. That's not how you normally talk. So I never had no answer. So sometimes I'll just say, like, I'm in sales. I am. I'm not in management. I had a guy one time, we were going golfing, and the rain was coming. He's like, could you pray that storm away? I said, I'm in sales, not in management. So I'm talking with this guy in my gym, and he asked, what do you do for a living? And I just feel led of the Lord to just tell him up front, like, I'm a pastor. He's like, are you old enough to be a pastor? I'm like, I don't really know. Not really sure. He's like, I don't really believe in that whole, like, Jesus thing. Like, I get it. I was a skeptic too. I don't really like Christians. I said, me neither. I knew the kind he was talking about. How many know the kind he was talking about? Yeah, they're all the ones that comment on Facebook. I'm sure that's none of you. He comes up and he says, I don't get the whole Jesus thing. I said, I understand. I really was a skeptic once too. All I have to say, my friend, is come and see. I'd love to tell you that he came the next Sunday and he gave his life to Jesus. Hasn't happened yet. But now each time when I go in the gym, he makes sure to make a connection with me. That didn't happen before. I ask him about his family. I ask him about his business as a personal trainer. I ask him how I can pray for him. I look for moments to just add value to his life. I can tell you about my barber, similar story. What's wrong with them is not their perspective, it's not their worldview, it's not their crazy, reckless lives. What's wrong with them is they don't know Jesus. Yeah. Come and see. And here's what I've learned. Here's where many Christians miss it when it comes to sharing their faith and inviting people to church. First is, you cannot reach people who you do not like. I once heard a story recently about a man who had a significant heart condition, and the cardiologist asked him and his wife to come to his office to hear about the report. And they go in the waiting room, and the doctor comes out, and he tells the wife, I need to speak to you first. The wife goes back in the doctor's office, deeply concerned. And he says, your husband has a very serious heart condition. He needs, for the rest of his life, in order for your husband to live, he needs a stress-free life. When he wakes up in the morning, he needs breakfast in bed. He needs the house to be clean and orderly and not cluttered all the time. And he cannot help with the housework. He can't touch a broom. Intimacy, whatever he needs. Dinner at night, to order. If he wants steak, what's he getting? Steak. And you can never be in a bad mood. His heart cannot take it. He needs a stress-free life. And he asked her, do you understand what I'm saying? She said she does. She goes back out in the waiting room and gets her husband, and they get in the car to go home. And on the way home, the husband, full of anxiety and worry, looks at his wife and says, what'd the doctor say? She looked at him and she paused and she said, you're going to die. You can't reach people you don't like. And the problem with people is not their sexual preferences. It's not their political views. It's not what they believe about creation or evolution. It's not their morality. What's wrong with people is they do not know Jesus. Right. The gospel is not trying to make bad people good people. The gospel's trying to make lost people found people. And if you don't like people who vote different than you, you can't reach them. If you don't like people who don't carry your Christian values, you can't reach them. If you don't like the public school system, you cannot reach them. Because how do lost people act? lost. How did you act before you knew Jesus? And when you didn't know Jesus, the last thing you needed was someone's finger in your face reminding you how messed up your life was. What you needed was someone who loved you, who just said, come and see. The second thing I've learned is you cannot reach people who do not like you. Similar to the first one. In fact, I'm going to need some help here. I've got, went away. I had a box. This right there. Perfect. Thank you. I had a friend who told me a story about how they ordered pizza. Great pizza. Pizza was made to order. The right ingredients, all the right stuff, and the delivery driver shows up. And in a moment, I'm trying to be funny, he shows me the pizza and goes, here you go. Right ingredients, right preparation, terrible delivery. How do you tip that guy? Do you hope that guy ever shows up again? You're like, can I even order from the same place knowing he works there? You can't reach people who do not like you. So I just want to ask, the people in your life that are far from God, but close to you, do they like you? Do people who, let's say it like this, people who lived crazy, reckless, immoral lives loved Jesus. Before they believed what he believed, they loved being around him. Do the people in your life that are far from God, the people in your life that act lost, do they like being around you? And do you like them? Wow. So then the question is, who do you invite to church? What are you looking for? How do you know it's the right time? Here, I'm going to give you 3 nots. The first knot is not in church. How many of you know somebody that's not in church? You live in South Florida, my friends. Let me ask you one more time. How many of you know someone that is not in church today? And if you don't, your world is too small. They're not in church. How about this one? It's not going well. You know anybody that's experiencing some financial pressure? Anyone go to the grocery store recently? You know anyone that's having a hard time in their business? Having a hard time in their marriage? Parenting got hard. How do you know it's hard? They're parenting a toddler or a teenager. Yeah. It's a similar experience. It's not going well. How about not prepared for? They're about to go to college. They're not prepared for it. They're about to get married. They're certainly not prepared. They're about to have their first kid. All the parents in the room, are they prepared? They have no idea what they just signed up for. They're not prepared. They're about to start a new business. They've never owned a business before. All the business owners, do they know what they just signed up for? No. Who do you know that's not in church? It's not going well. They're not prepared for. What's your response? Life's complicated. How many of you know life's complicated? How many of you know family is complicated? Yeah, for sure. Who's complicated in your family? You don't have to tell me. But if you don't know, it might be you. Life's complicated. You want to get it right. You want to get it right? If you're married, do you want to do it right? Lost people do too. If you're a parent, do you want to do it right? You want to do right by your kids? Lost people do too. If you're a business owner, do you want to do it right and be profitable? Lost people do too. Life's complicated. You want to get it right. We're here to help. Come and see. Who do you know that's far from God, but close to you? Verse 47, it says, when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. I love his answer. How do you know me? You don't know me. And Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. He could have said, oh, my gosh, Nathaniel, I formed you in your mother's womb. I wrote purpose over your life before you knew how to talk. I could tell you the number of hairs that are on your head, boy. When you talk about know you, I know you better than you know you. I know everything about you. I'm still trying to draw you. Today, maybe you find yourself far from God. Here's the great news of the gospel. Like Nathaniel. Nathaniel wasn't looking for Jesus. Nathaniel wasn't interested in Jesus. Nathaniel was offended by Jesus' questions. And in the midst of all of that, Jesus was still trying to draw Nathaniel. Nathaniel declared in verse 49, Rabbi, you really are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. How does Nathaniel go from nothing good could come from Nazareth? From you don't know me to you are my Lord and Savior, King of Israel, the promised Messiah. Here's how. Philip got Nathaniel in the presence of Jesus. And Jesus changed him. What's the answer for the people in your life that are far from God and close to you? They need to experience the presence of Jesus. The goal of reaching people who are far from God is not behavior modification, because they couldn't do it. It's not about winning arguments that don't matter. It's not about trying to get them to vote different. It is get them in the presence of a good God. When I first moved to South Florida to plant a new church, I didn't know anybody. I did what they call a parachute plant, where like you move to a city where you don't know anybody, with money you don't have and a team you don't have, to start a new church in one of the most unchurched places in America. Sounds like a bad plan. We moved here, I don't know a single person, and one of the first things you have to do in the ARC way is you got to build a team. You got to get a team of people that want to serve with you and like be part of the dream team. And I remember going to the gym, and I talked to several different people, invited people to coffee, and I had this guy approach me and just say, hey, are you the guy that's starting the new church in the area? I said, yeah, that's me. He's like, I'd love to talk to you about that. And I was so excited. He approached me. I'm like, oh, this is our first dream team. I'm so excited. This is like my first coffee meeting. Like, I have practiced the vision 100 times. I have practiced sharing it 100 times. I have been longing for this moment. So we go to Starbucks, and we're sitting in the Starbucks, and I'm like, little social on the front end, but then I'm just so excited, I just let them have it. Like, I just share the vision and all we're going to do and how the church is going to make a difference and how Sunrise and Plantation and Weston, people that are far from God, are going to come to know Jesus. And he's listening. And I get to the end of it, and I notice that, like, he's not responding the way that I thought he would. So I paused, and I just said, time out. Tell me your story. As soon as I asked the question, tears start running. He said, I grew up in church. I used to know God. I used to be close to God. I was a massage therapist coming out of high school while I was working on getting a personal training degree. And then I moved to South Florida to start a new business as a personal trainer. And he said, it's so expensive to live here. And now he starts really crying. I'm like, what is going on? And he said, and it's so hard to start a business when you're new. He said, one day I was doing a private massage for a woman, and she offered me $1,000 to make it more than a massage. And I said, yes. And now he starts like snot crying, like creating a scene at Starbucks. And through sobs, he says, and one yes turned into several yeses. Women turned into couples. Couples turned into men. He said, there is a darkness in my soul. And I hate who I've become. And And he starts really getting worked up. I grab his hands. And he says, could God ever forgive someone like me? Now I'm crying. And I said, my friend, my family, 4 kids, we moved here to start a church for you. Inside of Starbucks, I asked him if he wanted to get close to God again, if he was ready to ask God to forgive him. I told him, God can forgive you. He's not done with you. I prayed with him, and through sobs, he prays this prayer with me like all of Starbucks is watching. People don't know what to do. And I leave Starbucks. And on the way home, the Lord spoke to me and he said, son, don't forget why I sent you here. And if you will stay faithful, consistent at sharing your faith in our city with people that do not know me, I will give you a dream team that every church pastor wants. And I learned what's close to the heart of God is the people in our life that are close to us but far from him. So I have a challenge for you. Can I get someone to come up here to play with me? On your seat, there are 2 cards. Diane, how much time do I have? How much? Okay. On your seat, I have 2 cards there for you. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down names of people in your life that are far from God and close to you. And here's the reason why there's 2. Here, in a minute, once we go back into some time of worship, there's going to be some baskets here on the front. And one of those cards, I want you to come forward, and I want you to, as a prophetic gesture, come and put it into the basket as just saying, God, I give them to you, and I'm asking you, God, to give me a moment with them. And the other card, the reason why there's 2, is the other card I want you to have the same names on it, and I want you to take it home. I want you to put it in your Bible or in the place where you spend time with God, or put it in your car, in a place where you can see it and you'll pray for them on your way to work, and just asking God to give you a moment to share your faith. Because I'm going to tell you what happens. Your favorite Sunday at Oceanside, your favorite one, will be the Sunday that person you've prayed for so long, they showed up. And at the end of the service, like every service, there's the moment, everyone bow your head and close your eyes. And today, if you want to give your life to Jesus, put your hand up. And you know what you'll do? You'll be like, because you've been praying for that moment.
Yeah, that's good.
You've been loving him for that moment. You've 13 times said, come and see. So while you're writing down names, I want to tell you a final story. I've got a friend named D'Angelo. He's like my right-hand guy at Vibrant. He met Jesus inside of a jail cell when a pastor came and shared the message of Jesus with him. He was on trial for organized crime, guns, drugs, the works, and he was guilty. And they had all the evidence they needed to convict him and put him in jail or in prison for life. The cop that had arrested him was dirty on a different case. And when that cop got arrested, all of his cases got thrown out. And D'Angelo gets sent home. While he was in prison, he prayed and he said, God, if you would ever let me out of here, I'll give my whole life to you. And he comes out of jail a different man. He begins to get discipled. Begins to grow in a passion for young people like him. Starts serving in the youth ministry, reaching kids from the hood, people that grew up on this wrong side of the tracks, the places where he grew up, the places where he caused trouble, sold guns and drugs. started discipling young people. And one of these young guys, his growing up was as bad as it can be. Like, if you can imagine the worst case scenario for a young child, a young boy, he had it. And he had no idea how to deal with his anger and his aggression, so he starts paying for boxing lessons for this young man. Young man's pretty good at it. He's got a lot of anger. He doesn't have a lot of fear. After a few years of paying for his lessons, the kid kind of goes MIA for a few years. And during those few years, he got one person pregnant, got another person pregnant, and then got a third person pregnant. 3 baby mamas. He's still fighting. One day, this young man, in a moment of desperation in his own soul and just frustrated with how far his life had gone from what he hoped for, he shows up to our church. You know why? D'Angelo's there. This young man gives his life to the Lord on that first Sunday, just sobbing. He couldn't even raise his hand. He just bawled. And after the service, he goes up to D'Angelo and he says, "Would God forgive someone like me?" And D'Angelo hugs him. He's like, "Yes, he will, because he forgave me." He invites one of his baby mamas to come to Vibrant, to our church. Mom's a mess. Kid's a mess. She starts showing up kind of because he's there. After a few months, I remember the Sunday. Bow your head and close your eyes. If you want to give your life to Jesus, put your hand up. Tears just start streaming. And she starts sobbing. And she gives her life to the Lord. This last fall, this last spring, we have a group called Freedom. And she went through the Freedom course that led to the Freedom Conference. And at the end of the Freedom Conference, you get this Freedom t-shirt. And I just knew that she had some pretty powerful moments with the Lord. She had shared the story with my wife while we were at the conference. And the next morning, everyone shows up in their Freedom shirts. And I see her, she's walking into the church, and I just said, "How does freedom fit?" And she caught I wasn't talking about her shirt. Again, tears start streaming. And here's what she said. She said, "I've never felt clean before. Until now." She invites her brother. This is before the freedom thing, so her life's still messy. She invites her brother, and he brought his live-in girlfriend. And they're a mess, and we're in a relationship series. And 2 Sundays in, I watched both of them give their lives to the Lord. I did their wedding last night. Here's the point of the story. This is it. If you want to get close to God, if you want your faith to come alive, if you want to get excited about what God's doing on Sundays more than you ever have before, open your heart and your life to people far from God with a come and see attitude. Don't argue. Don't get in dumb fights. Don't try to change their behavior. Don't try to change their mindsets. Just like Nathaniel. Just like my boxer friend. Just like the guy I met at the gym that went to Starbucks with me. What they needed and what changed them was they got in the presence of Jesus. Yeah. Who do you know that's far from God but close to you?